Hello dear student, how are you? Hope you are fine and safe at your home. Now, welcome back to the Christian religion and moral education class of 9. Today, I am going to talk about the silent voice of conscience from chapter 11 of your textbook. Today's lesson. Today, I will explain about what is conscience and values. Then, sources of moral values. Then, how do we form conscience? At last, I will explain gospel values in our life. Actually, God created human beings, giving them body, mind, and soul. At the same time, He gave each person a sound conscience, which is God's voice. So here, at first we will be know about what is conscience. Conscience is the core of human heart and the temple of God. A person who takes care of his and her conscience has a good and sound conscience, and the one who has a good and sound conscience can hear God's voice more clearly. We need a sound and healthy conscience in order to hear the voice of God. He never shouts, rather, he speaks in a very low and clear voice. A good and healthy conscience listens to that voice silently. His voice speaks, tells us clearly what is right and what is not, what is just and what is unjust. Our conscience is the voice of God. Now, the meaning of values. Value is defined as that which makes something desirable, attractive, worthy of approval, admiration, etc., and which inspire feelings, judgments, or attitudes of esteem. Human life is meaningless without values. No one respects a valueless person. Without values, one becomes like a common animal. A person who has good values in life and lives life accordingly is loved and respected by all. Values help a person to form one's moral character, which is helpful for one's moral judgment and helps the person to live accordingly. Values and conscience are related to each other. Both of them affect on another. A person who has good and standard values also has a good conscience. In other words, a person who has a good and pure conscience also has good and high values in life. On the contrary, we cannot expect a good conscience from a person who does not have a good and high values in life. In other words, one who does not have good and sound conscience has distorted and indecent values in life. Now, sources of moral values. Sources of our moral values can be separated into two groups: sources within and sources outside. Sources within, another name is subjective sources. God created us in His own image and likeness. In the book of Genesis, God said, "Let us make man in our own image and likeness." Bernard Herring wrote in his theology book, "We are good in the depth of our being and created for the good. Only because our eye is made for the light can it see the light of goodness. Only because we are created for love, eternal love itself, are we challenged by the force of love in the good and inflamed by it. This natural affinity of ours for the good can be disturbed by habits of sin, so that spiritually we become partially blind. But the seed of good is not destroyed. It still remains in our nature. And the warmth of divine love, like rays from the sun, can quicken it with life. Now, sources outside. Another name is objective sources. These are mainly two, namely the community in which we live and divine revelation. Man cannot live alone. He lives in a family, in a society. So he is influenced by the prevalent and traditional values of his family and society. Example, he respects the elders, follows the law and order of the family and society, lives peacefully with others, etc. On the other hand, everybody follows his and her religion and any belief. Religious education or divine commands help the people to build the ethical and human values. Now, how do we form conscience? We already said that moral values and conscience are related to each other and affect each other. So, as moral values are developed in two ways, conscience is also developed into two ways by internal values and external values. From these two kinds of values, we see two kinds of conscience, internal conscience and external conscience. Internal conscience. God shared His goodness and beauty with every human being. For this reason, every person can recognize moral values, can judge what is good and what is bad, what we ought to do and what ought not to do. He and she can make a decision according to his and her conscience and proceed to act. The more God-fearing and upright a person is, the more beautiful is his and her conscience. Here we can mention the example of King Suleiman as a model. Number B. External conscience. Another name is influence from outside. As with values, our conscience is also influenced and affected by those of others. One's family, society, religion, country, local and foreign cultural values and moral standard affect the formation of conscience. Practice of religion in family and society, love to God and mankind influence a lot to the formation of one's conscience. On the other hand, negative influences of one's family, society, country, and culture of the world hamper the formation of a good and fair conscience. For example, female fetuses are aborted without objection due to negative attitude to women. Today, many do not consider these sinful acts as sins. Both positive and negative influences from outside have tremendous influence in the formation of our conscience. Growth in maturity. The following two topics are very important for growing up towards maturity. Number 1. Growing up as a mature, conscientious person. Growing up a mature, conscientious person is a lifelong journey. It is a lifelong practice. It goes on from childhood till death. Through personal and communitarian reflection, we come to a deeper understanding of our own position with regard to the values we hold. We come to realize that we belong to a society, the thought patterns of which we have been following since our childhood. Present world has become a family and a society. It is changing rapidly. As a result, every day we are facing new challenges. We need to awaken our conscience to face these new challenges and problems in this changing world. Number two, growth in a combined work of individuals and society. An individual and society are closely connected. There are birth, life, death in a society. He grows up in a society and his conscience and values are acknowledged. Since man and society are in continual growth, it is necessary to reassess our values. If we live only by own conscience, of then we disregard our society. On the other hand, if we just follow the conscience, our society, we have nothing of our own. Therefore, one has to discern the good values of the society and accept these as his and her own. Now, bad effects for not obeying the moral values. Our values are like rail lines. As rail lines helps the driver to guide the train in the right direction, in the same way our good values lead us to the right path of our life. But the one who does not have good values in life easily gets lost by evil. This type of person can be spoiled by a bad company and can get addicted by any bad habit. That person might also have HIV and can easily become a source of transferring it to others. Today, there are hundreds of thousands youth, children, adults are spoiling life by drug addiction. We can see the following consequences of drug addiction. Habit of telling lies, stealing, disobedience and misbehavior with parents and others, absence in family prayer and Sunday masses, moral degradation. So, I want to say that every youth should take an oath to make life beautiful by following the moral values of your religion. Now, gospel values in our life. The gospel values are the criteria and model for every Christian. Jesus himself taught these values and commanded his disciples to teach them to others. Go to all nations, everywhere, and make them my disciples. Baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, and teach them to obey everything I have commanded you. The gospel values are the guiding force and foundation of our good moral life and beautiful life. Therefore, every Christian has to read the Gospels, reflect on them, and live life accordingly. Jesus wants us to make his values of life as our own and to live our lives according to these values. Only his values of life will lead us to the truth and salvation. Jesus said, I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. At last, prayer. We have to pray to God every day for a right and sound conscience. With similar words of King Solomon, we can pray. Loving God, grant me wisdom that I may know clearly the difference between good and bad and lead my life to the right path every day. So, in this class, I have explained about the silent voice of conscience. I think everything's are clear to you. If you face any problem, you can contact with me. Today, up to this, thank you.